to have an opportunity to talk about their experiences. I think it's very easy to feel like you are climbing that ladder alone, because so often when you are a minority, an African American in business, you are so often the only one in the room. And, I spent most of my career being the only one in the room.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters related to race, especially race in corporate America. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. And we are live at 88.7 WNHU on the Richter Dial, is shaking up and down at the University of New Haven podcast studio. We want to thank them for hosting a Black Executive Perspective podcast to record this really great topic. We know the students are back, so go Chargers. Have a great semester. And then also, we want to make sure that you check out our partners, Codem Magazine, right? Whose mission is first saving the Black family by first saving the Black men. So definitely check them out at codemmagazine.com. So today, we are joined by Rob Simmelkjaer, CEO of the New York Roadrunners, a nonprofit dedicated to improving health and well-being through running. Rob will share his journey and discuss the inclusive, transformative power of running, emphasizing its benefits for mental health. We'll also explore how run clubs are fostering communities and expanding new runners of every age, ability, and background, building diverse communities. Let me tell you a little bit about Rob. Rob Simmelkjaer became the CEO of New York Roadrunner in December 2022. A New Yorker and experienced sport executive, Rob is a dedicated runner with 2 New York City marathon finishes, which is 2 more than I have. His career includes significant roles at ESPN and NBC Sports, where he managed international development and new business ventures. Rob has contributed to several major networks, including ABC News, MSNBC, NBC, and anchored the Olympic coverage in 2012 and 2016. He founded Persona Media Incorporated and served as chairman of the Connecticut Lottery Board after being appointed by Governor Ned Lamont. I got to talk to him about that because I still haven't hit any numbers yet, all right? So I got to see if there's an inside game on that. Rob, a Dartmouth and Harvard law graduate, formerly practiced law in New York City. Rob has 2 beautiful daughters named Julia and Annika, and we can't forget the 2 widows named Mookie and Frankie, who actually keep him more busy than everything else he does. All right. Rob Simmelkjaer, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my brother.
Tony, thank you so much, man. I love the intro. You're right about them woodles that keep me busy, but I'm probably running around after something right now. I should probably be bringing them inside, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, my friend. We're very excited to chat with you about this topic. It's interesting. My producer, Khalees, he's a grad school student here, and he was saying as we were going through the run of show, he was like, "Oh man, this is interesting because I just started running." I said, "When did you just start?" He was like, "Yesterday." He said, "I ran 4 miles and I'm sore." And I'm like, "All right, buddy, you just got to slow down and take it little by little." But we definitely want to hear more from you about what you're doing at New York City Roadrunner, and more importantly, about your background and all the other things of benefits of running. But before we go to that, my friend, tell us a little bit about where you're currently living, and let's expand a little bit into your background with your family.
Yeah, so you mentioned Connecticut in the intro, and I live mostly in Connecticut, Westport, Connecticut, so not too far down 95 from New Haven, where it sounds like you're doing your thing. I've lived in Westport for just over 11 years, and I love it. I love Connecticut. It's a great place, but I'm a native New Yorker. I was born in Manhattan. I was actually the 4th generation in my family to be born on the island of Manhattan. Lived in the city till I was a little kid, and then we moved to Bergen County, New Jersey, where I lived for a lot of my childhood, but I went to school in New York from 7th grade on. So I'm really like a New Yorker, but I've got this kind of tri-state background with a little Jersey and obviously Connecticut now. So a very typical New York kind of portfolio. And Yeah, it's I love Connecticut. I love the split because I stay in the city 2 or 3 nights a week as well with the job. A lot of evening events, and then of course a lot of early morning running events. So it helps me to have a place in the city as well. So I'm back and forth on the Metro North New Haven line a
Yeah.
lot between Westport and Grand Central.
Yeah, so I frequently a couple days a week myself because I work in the city. I live in Milford, so about 20, 25 minutes away from you. So definitely can deal with the Connecticut vibe. Tell us a little bit about your daughters and your wife.
Well, my girls are 15 and 10. Julia is just starting sophomore year of high school. She is actually amazingly following in my sports footsteps. I played baseball and ran cross country. She plays softball and runs cross country. She's actually, just starting her sophomore year, so she's doing the running thing as well, which has been great. We get to run a lot of races together. My little one, Annika's 10. She is in school in Westport as well, going into 6th grade. And she is more like artistic, that's more her
Mm.
thing. She's really into theater and musical theater in particular. So she's been in lots of different shows. I actually had a tough conflict last spring. We had the Brooklyn Half Marathon, the RBC Brooklyn Half, which is one of our biggest races. And she was in like 2 shows that day. So I had to leave
Wow.
early, couldn't get to the finish line. I went to the starting line and then went back to Connecticut to see her in her shows. So that's her thing. But she's run a little too. She's run a couple of our kids' races at Roadrunners, and she has a great time. So that's my fam. My girls are, everything with me, and them and the dogs, they keep me pretty busy.
Oh, that is awesome, my friend. Really, really glad to hear. Especially, I love the part about you, having to come back and being there for her show, which is very important. That shows what type of great dad you are. So let me ask you this, my friend. Why, look, you've been on, and we went through your bio, MSNBC, NBC, ABC. Basically were at 2 Olympics. I believe you were just in Paris
Yes.
as well at the last Olympics. Why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
Well, I think that it's really important to have a forum for African Americans in business, whether it's for-profit business or not-for-profit executive management, which is what I'm doing now, to have an opportunity to talk about their experiences. I think it's very easy to feel like you are climbing that ladder alone, because so often when you are a minority, an African American in business, you are so often the only one in the room. And, I spent most of my career being the only one in the room, right? And especially the higher level rooms. I'm pleased to say that's not the case at all at New York Roadrunners, but it certainly was the case in previous stops in my career. So I think it really is important to have a forum to have these conversations, a place where people can listen and, understand that the challenges that they may be having aren't alone, aren't unique, I should say, and hear from people who have been able to have some success and the lessons that they've learned along the way. So I appreciate you for doing this, Tony. I think it's great to have a forum like this, and I hope my being here is helpful to somebody out there listening.
Well, that's the goal, my friend, but I really appreciate that. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So, seems like you're chomping at the bit, my man. So, you ready to talk about it?
Let's go.
Okay, awesome. So, let's talk about it. So, let's, you talked about a little bit growing up in New York until you were, a young kid, and then moving to Jersey, and then now you live in Connecticut. But talk a little bit about now you've had a lot of roles. Talk a little bit about what was influential for you growing up that made you want to be working at a sports network and ultimately started running, and we'll get into the CEO of New York Roadrunners shortly. But I love to hear that background of just, hey, this is where I came, this is where I started, but this parents, whatever, influenced me to where I am today.
Well, I think that it's always great in life if you can start, when you think about what you want to do in life, it's great if you can start with something that you love, right? I just think that's always where you want to start, is figuring out at a young age what you love, and then figuring out if there's a way to make a lifestyle, a career out of that, because if you do that successfully, then I always say you never work, right? And so from a very young age, I love sports. I was obsessed with watching and playing. I always wanted to be engaged in some kind of sport. My first true love was baseball.
Right.
Diehard New York Mets fan. When they were really bad, and then they got good when Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry and Keith Hernandez were on the scene. And then I went really crazy, became totally obsessed. But, loved sports, loved baseball, loved other sports too. And also just loved being active and running around. Like a good day for me was a day when I was outside 6 or 7 hours doing my thing, playing with friends, riding a bike, running around, playing this game or that game. Running was a part of everything I did, right? So running was like natural to me.
Right.
Whether it was running in a baseball game or just running around after my friends, running was just what I did. And it wasn't until I got into school, like 7th grade, I think was the first time anybody ever timed me running anything. I remember they fresh 7th grade, they kind of like timed you in the mile. I think that was kind of the first time I was really timed.
You 100% right. It was the same thing when I was in 7th grade. They timed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. And so I just did what I just did. I just ran, right? And I didn't really know how it would feel to run a mile. I probably like went way too fast out of the gate and was probably exhausted, but I think I ran pretty well. And my time was pretty good. First time running a mile. I think my first mile that I ran was under 7 minutes or something like that, 6 something. Okay. And so the gym teacher was like, oh yeah, you can run, right? That's pretty good. And that got me thinking, oh, this running could be a thing for me. And the coaches started kind of talking to me. The cross country coach tried to recruit me. And so, yeah, that's the first time running really became a thing for me. But mostly the benefit at the time, Tony, was if you were on a team in the fall, you didn't have to go to gym class. So I was like, all right, I can get a free period in the middle of the day to like hang out with my friends if I do this cross country thing after school. So that was the real sell point.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then so loving sports, basically finding your groove with running, something you've always did. How did that take you to the next level? Because at the end of the day, you ended up going to Harvard and Dartmouth, right? Was sports still a theme? And then you ended up working at a couple of major networks around sports, ESPN being one. So if I'm hearing you correctly, your love of sports, was that a guide for you as you moved up in your career?
It never went away.
Mm-hmm.
It never went away. It was always there as something that I knew I wanted to do. And, when I got to college, I stayed with baseball a little bit, even in college. I walked on and played a little bit.
So
at Dartmouth,
you played?
But like at like a barely played level. I was like kind of like useful for a little defense here and there, but I wasn't recruited. So I walked on and was able to play a little bit. But by my junior year, I wasn't playing anymore. But what I discovered in college was broadcasting. And Dartmouth had a radio station, and I quickly got into that and started covering the games. I was the play-by-play voice of Dartmouth sports from my sophomore year on. I was the director of I was the sports director by my junior year, and so I was on the road with the football team, the basketball team, hockey, baseball. I was covering all the sports. I knew all the coaches. And so I was really ingrained in Dartmouth sports. And that really turned into a love of mine because I loved talking about sports. I loved the live game experience and telling that story of the game to listeners through a radio microphone. I just loved it. And getting out of college, I really thought that's what I wanted to do. And I had internships, and I tried to parlay that into a job. And actually, when I got out of college, I was able to get a job as a kind of a backup reporter at a TV station in Connecticut, by the way, Hartford, Connecticut, WFSB.
Channel 3. Channel 3, yes.
That's right. Hired me as like a kind of a part-time reporter up there. And so I started getting into it a little bit. And that's what I really thought I was going to do. But it was hard to break into that, like that's a hard thing to get into. And I was kind of bopping around trying to figure out if I could find a job in some small market somewhere as a sports reporter. And my dad, who is a lawyer, 84 years old, still practices. He's a labor and employment arbitrator.
Okay.
And he was kind of like, hey, Robbie, called me Robbie. He was like, when are you going to like think about like a career, like, is this sports broadcasting thing really going to be a career for you? Like, maybe you should, you went to Dartmouth, like maybe you should think about getting a real job, And I was like, all right. So I agreed with him that I would just take the LSAT. I would take the law school admissions test just to kind of get him off my back.
Right.
And I took the LSAT and I got a pretty good score. And so I was like, all right, I'll apply to a few law schools. And I was able to get into Harvard Law School. And so at that point, I was like, all right, I probably should do this because, you know what? Even though I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer, I knew that having that education would take me somewhere. So, and I just thought it'd be a great experience too. So my dad was obviously thrilled that I got into Harvard Law School. And so I said, great, we're going to do this. My mom was happy too. And, that was the next 3 years of my life.
That is awesome, my friend. So I want to back up a second. So you're calling baseball games at Dartmouth. All right. How did you learn how to call a game? Because sometimes I sit back and I think it's easy to do. Okay. And maybe baseball may be a little slow. I want to hear your thoughts versus basketball or something of that nature. But I love to hear, how did you learn how to call a game?
I learned first and foremost by watching a lot of baseball. And I watched more baseball than I probably should have as a kid. I just watched it all the time. In New York, we had some amazing broadcasters. For the Mets, it was Bob Murphy, who was an amazing radio broadcaster, Howie Rose, who still does the games today, Gary Cohen, who is on the TV side with the Mets now. And so I listened to and watched so many games that I kind of knew the art of it before I ever did it. And when I actually had a chance to do it, of course, you learn by trial and error. Mm-hmm. And I would call games, and then I would actually go back and listen to the games that I called. I was so obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the craft of it. I loved it. And I would listen to the games and I would say, okay, you could have described that better, or you could have said that better. And so I would really kind of get a lot from listening to my broadcast. And that made me a lot better because I was able to think in the moment of the broadcast how it would sound to a listener, because I was a listener to those games after the fact. And so that was great. And I was, I won an award getting out of college. They gave me a journalism award because of the sports broadcasting I did. And also I did a lot of political coverage as well. That's always been my other love, Tony, really. Sports and politics were really the things I was most passionate about growing up. And I was at Dartmouth in New Hampshire in 1992 when the New Hampshire primary took place. And that was the presidential election that produced Bill Clinton.
Correct.
And Bill Clinton was at a Dartmouth football game one day. And I sent somebody to come down and bring him up to the booth. And I got to interview Bill Clinton live at the halftime of a Dartmouth football game once, which was really cool as well.
That must have been awesome, right?
Governor Bill Clinton at the time.
Because he was governor of Arkansas at
That's
the time,
right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that must have been a highlight at that time frame, right?
Oh, it was incredible.
Let me ask you this. When you, as somebody growing up, and your experience with sports, which from a race standpoint transcends anything, right? People of all different type of colors play sports, backgrounds, whole 9 yards. Here you're going up to Dartmouth, right? Which is probably not as racial diverse as a lot of schools, okay? And then you're walking on the baseball team and you become their broadcaster. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Did you feel comfortable? Was it something that you had to grow into? Talk a little bit about that.
One of the things that I love about sports is just how it transcends these differences and divides that we have. People love sports, and if you can do the thing, okay, if you've got the skills on the field, especially nowadays, that wasn't the case, of course, back in the 30s and 40s, before the Jackie Robinson broke through and created the world we have. Back then, it didn't matter how good you were. Matter. The color line came first.
Exactly.
We're lucky now to be in a world where your ability in sports is the thing that matters. And what's great about sports, Tony, is that your ability is pretty objective. If you hit 350, nobody can say you didn't hit 350. Nobody can have an opinion about your performance. The numbers speak for themselves. If you're a tennis player and you beat the other player,
six love,
you beat them, right? You beat them. And there's nobody can say, well, I think, you're not the right fit for this, whatever. Like, no. You won the match, right? So there's a level of objectivity that's great. As a broadcaster, of course, it's not that objective. People can have a lot of opinions about you as a broadcaster, but I think what I was able to do, and I think what people appreciated about even back then, was really, I did the work, right? I made sure I really knew the stories that I was telling. I always try to come into a broadcast, not just to tell the story of the game, but the story of the people in the game.
Story, yeah.
Exactly. And why you should care about this player, why you should care about this game, right? That was always the key, was like making it interesting for people. And I could only do that by talking to the players a lot. I would spend as much time as I could on the bus rides, in the, after practice, like just getting to know them as people so that I could give a little bit of a perspective on them and, what they might be going through, or, what they were, confident in or not confident in their games or whatever. That people care about people at the end of the day. The sports are great and people care about the results and they want their team to win, but the people is what makes it interesting.
Totally agree. Let me ask you this. Obviously the other thing that's very important as human beings, especially when we go off to school, it can be even in our own town, but especially as we leave, confidence is a key as well, right? How we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're depending where we grow up and what environment we're in, we either believe that we can go out and do anything, or we believe that, right, it doesn't matter how smart we are, we believe that we don't rate, right?
Yes.
Growing up, tell us a little bit about, love sports and stuff of that nature, but tell us a little bit about your confidence and going into places that there wasn't, as you spoke about earlier in our beginning, there wasn't a lot of people that looked like you.
Thank you. That's a great question. Pardon my dogs barking a bit in the background. That's what they do.
That's fine.
Mookie and Frankie the Woodles acting up.
The Woodles. I don't hear the kids, but I hear the Woodles.
That's right. That's what you hear. So it's a great question. And I think that I would say two things. First of all, part of it is how I grew up. So my parents moved out of Manhattan. We lived in the Upper West Side. They grew up, my dad grew up in Harlem. My mother grew up in Danville, Virginia, toward the later stages of segregation in the South. And wow. She went to a segregated school, couldn't go to UVA because they weren't really accepting people like her yet. So she moved to City College of New York, moved to New York to go to City College. And that's where she met my dad. And so they moved out of New York City, moved to the suburbs of New Jersey because they thought that would be a better environment for me and my brother to grow up in. And we were mostly surrounded by white kids, especially in the suburb that we ended up spending most of our time in. And I think that was something they thought would be good. And in some ways it was good, in some ways not. But I think that what was good about it was that I never felt that I didn't belong in any room. I from a young age, I was around white people, I was around black people, I was around all kinds of people. So by the time I got a little older and went into junior high school and high school, like there wasn't a room that I was uncomfortable in. There wasn't a type of person that I didn't think I could communicate with or measure up to. I knew that my work was going to determine what I was able to do. And that was the other thing about my parents, was they always made it clear that it was about the work, and if you put in the work, then everything else will take care of itself. They were relentless in terms of pushing on the work. I think about Kamala Harris's speech last week at the Democratic National Convention, where she talked about her mom saying, she was not allowed to do anything half-assed. Right. And that was definitely a thing in my house. Nothing half-assed. I remember that phrase being thrown around all the time.
All the time. Half-assed.
And I really related to that. And so that kind of just put in an ethic in my mind that, listen, you do the work and you belong in any room, and I understand, like, that was a privilege I had, having parents who felt that way, who instilled that in me, and also who put me in enough different kinds of rooms,
right,
where I was able to get that level of comfort at a young age. A lot of kids don't have that. And I think one of the most important things for kids to get at a young age is exposure to different kinds of rooms, so that you've been there and you've seen it, and you can kind of read those rooms as you get older, and you get surprised less because you've you've encountered more different types of people and the way they think. And so you're more confident because you'll know a bit more about what to expect in any given type of room. That kind of exposure is so valuable. And there's a lot of different ways to get it. Sports can be part of it, by the way, but there's other kinds of ways to get it. So I think that's what I was able to luckily have at a pretty young age, which made me really comfortable. So by the time I got to college, like there wasn't really a table I wouldn't sit at. There was the black table, there was the white table. I didn't care. I'd sit anywhere. Right. And that was rare at that time. It was rare, in those days. And sometimes it wasn't easy because sometimes it would, those decisions about what table to sit at were hard, Tony. Sitting at the white table would get me some looks.
Especially from your brothers, right?
That's
the brothers would look at you like, why are you sitting over here selling us out?
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It was hard to balance that. I'd be like, okay, can I sit at the black table on Tuesdays and Thursdays and the white table Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays? Like there wasn't any rules for that. So I kind of had to make it up, and it wasn't easy to do that, to be honest.
Buddy, I can relate, and I love what you said. So number one, thank you for going through how your parents brought you up and instilling a work ethic and confidence in you that you can carry. But also to your point, the exposure is really the key here, right? I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. All right. Now, people think of Detroit, Michigan, they think, I'm going to use the coded phrases, urban, it's this, it's that, which means black, right? However, I grew up on the west side of Detroit in the early 70s. My neighborhood we were one of the few black families that lived on that side of town, right? And growing up and my neighbors and friends and all of us playing and our families talking. And then when I went in the military, right? When I went in the Army, when I was living in Detroit, I never met anybody from Puerto Rico. I never met anybody from Jamaica. So having that exposure to go and meet people from all around the world and then live in Hawaii and then meet a whole new culture and go to Korea. So those things, to your point, makes a huge difference because a lot of time, if you grow up in one area and that's all you see, you think that area is the world. All right. And
Tony, let me tell you, we have at New York Roadrunners all these amazing youth and community programs. We have all these free races for kids. And we have a race in March. We have the United Airlines NYC Half Marathon. And right alongside that is the Times Square Kids Race, because that half marathon goes right through Times Square. They actually closed Times Square in March for this race. And so the kids race happens in Times Square.
Right.
And I went to that race this year. My daughter, my oldest daughter, ran in it. And I met a bunch of kids who were there as part of the program. They were there with their teachers. We send a school bus to their school on a Sunday morning, and they get picked up and they get brought into Times Square, and they're there to run this race. And I heard this one kid talking, and I kind of joined the conversation. And I think he was from the Bronx. His school was in the Bronx, and he was, I think, 12 years old. 11, 12 years old, something like that. And his eyes were like so wide, looking at all the lights and the billboards of Times Square. And I was like, yeah, this is cool, right? Like, how do you like being in Times Square? And this is about a 12-year-old New Yorker, never had been to Times Square, lived in the Bronx, and had never been to Times Square, probably one, maximum two subway lines.
Buddy, flat
to
out.
get there, right?
Flat out.
And I was like, wow, like think about that for a second. And this kid's world is expanding in his own city, but it's because he came to a race to run. And like, that's what I mean about sports and running, but any sport, the places it can take you, right? And this wasn't taking this kid very far, but it was something that was really expanding his horizons.
Exactly. Let's go there. You became the CEO of New York Roadrunners. All right. And obviously, we talked about your background, sports, the whole 9 yards. What made you, tell us how you became the CEO of something that's changing lives and is also a passion that you love?
Well, I'm very fortunate. It's an amazing position because it's an amazing organization. A little known fact, I think, for a lot of folks, the first president of New York Roadrunners, and this organization was founded in the late 1950s. The first president was a black man.
Wow.
Ted Corbett.
I did not know that.
It's not known by many people. It's a story that we want to tell more. But Ted Corbett was an incredible runner. He was the first African-American to compete in the Olympics in the marathon. He was a terrific marathoner.
What Olympics was this when he was this?
He would have competed
36,
in
40?
I believe it would have been 1960.
Oh, so it was the Rome Olympics with Wilma Rudolph and stuff to that nature?
Yes.
Got it.
We'll go back and correct it if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 60 that he competed in the marathon. And he was an unbelievable distance runner. He lived in the Bronx and used to work on Wall Street and would run to work both ways, down and back. He would run hundreds of miles a week. That's what he was known for. And so he founded Roadrunners, and, of course it grew over the years. Obviously the marathon didn't start until the early 70s. And then it became a 5-borough marathon in 1976, which really put it on the map. So it's this incredible organization. And my story, I mentioned that I had run in high school. I hadn't really run that much, a little bit here and there when I was in college and law school. But my third year of law school at Harvard, one day I got tickets to a baseball game. Of course, Red Sox played the Patriots Day game at 11 a.m.
Oh, buddy, I used to go to those. My wife is from Boston. We used to work up there. That 11 o'clock game is awesome.
That's right. And that's the day of the Boston Marathon. So exactly. I walked outside Fenway Park after this game, and I see all these people running down Boylston Street to the finish line of the marathon. And I'm like, wow, that looks really cool. I was like, I think I'd like to do that someday. And I said, you know what? Why not do it this year? And so, but not in Boston. Of course, I had to do it in New York. So I'm New York. I'm doing it in New York. So
somebody might see me and be like, it's like sitting at one of those other tables, right?
No, there's no way I was doing a marathon besides the New York City Marathon. Come on.
Oh,
so I mailed in, back then it was snail mail for an application, and then they mailed it back to me, and then I sent it in, and lucky enough, I got in my first time in the drawing, and I ran the marathon in 1997, and it was incredible. It was one of the most amazing days of my life, although it was also an incredibly rainy marathon. It was like the worst weather in the history of the marathon.
Okay.
But I thought, okay, I'm going to do this one and done. And I was like, all right, well, I did that. Too bad it rained so hard, but that was cool. And I wasn't going to do it again, but it kind of reignited my love of running. And so I ran a lot more from that day on for fun in New York City. I ran some half marathons as well. And then I decided, you know what, 2013, many years later, 16 years later, my second daughter was being born. We were going to move out of New York City to Connecticut at the time. And so I said, let me just try one more time. Maybe I can get a better day. Maybe I can get my time under 3.5 hours, which I thought would be cool. So I ran it one more time and managed to run it in 3:28. And that was my kind of swan. I thought that was my swan song, but I stayed aware certainly of Roadrunners and everything they were doing. And I had my career, as you mentioned at the beginning, at ESPN and NBC Sports, working in the sports industry. And yeah, in the summer of 2022, I just got a call from a recruiting firm that was hired to find the next CEO of New York Roadrunners. And I knew some people there, and they knew me, and they knew of my background, and that I'd run and all that. And yeah, they just thought I'd be a good fit. And I started talking to them and then talking to the board, and it all kind of played out. And here I am.
Buddy, that is awesome. And what's interesting now that, and again, I always thought running was something that was always very highly participated with people all over. But over the last 3-4 years, running has increased in terms of running clubs and stuff to that nature. Talk a little bit about that, because it's not just about the New York Marathon now, right? It's about all the things. You just talk about the one thing in Times Square with the kids. It's about a lot of things that you guys are doing that's touching people throughout the city, around the world, and all types of people.
Running is so hot right now, Tony, and it's pretty clearly a function of the pandemic. And the fact that during those days, those dark days of 2020 and 21, there wasn't a whole lot we could do, right? The gyms were closed. You couldn't do a whole lot, but you also needed some kind of an outlet. You needed some exercise. You needed something for your mental health. And so many people took up running. And, I'd always been a runner, but those days in 2020, I was running all the time. I was running 7 days a week because there was nothing else you could do.
Plus you can run by yourself.
That's right. It was safe. It was outside. You didn't have to touch anybody or anything. You're just running. And so many people found it then. And now since the pandemic ended, I think what we're seeing is people have stayed with it. But I always feel like they came for the running, but they stayed for the people, because people, once they could start getting back together with people, they started finding these run clubs, and it became a social outlet as well. And, you know, what did we all need coming out of the pandemic, right? We needed to reconnect with people,
Right.
because we'd all been so isolated and had struggled so much with that. So running became more than running. It became a huge part of people's social lives and their community, and they connected. And so you mentioned all these run clubs, and we've seen this incredible boom of running clubs in New York City, an incredible boom in running. Almost every race has been sold out since I've been CEO. Coming up on 2 years now, almost every race has been sold out because of this boom. It's incredible. So it really has kind of become a thing that people are making the center of their lives. I think there are a lot of reasons why, but I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing people are staying for is what it does for their mental health. Because yes, you feel good physically, but the way you feel mentally, and the ability running has to center you, to relieve stress, to help you break out of maybe a funk you may be in, or a mild depression, you know, is something that I think is what really keeps people coming back. You ask someone who runs 5 days a week, why do you run 5 days a week? And they'll be like, well, ask my partner, ask my wife, ask my husband why, because they know what I'm like on the days I don't run. And that's why. That's why.
So it's funny. Actually, I should be running right now. my girl will be all over me. Let's back up a little bit. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. When you say running club, can you define that for the novice in terms of what a running club is?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of different types. You know, there are running clubs that are competitive, right? That are really out there to compete in races. We have some really competitive running clubs in New York City that compete in our races. We have something called the Club Point Series, where you can win, you know, the clubs win prizes and trophies and stuff for being fast. So there's that. But then there's kind of hybrid that are like a little bit competitive, but a little bit social. And then there's a lot of clubs that are really almost purely social, right? That are just, they meet up, they go for a run together, and then that's just the prelude to going out to coffee or to a bar or to whatever. There's even now these run clubs I've started to see in New York City that are specifically targeting singles. And you go out for a run on a Thursday night, and then you go out to a bar or something. And there's one that I found where you wear black, like a black outfit if you're single, so that when you go to the after event at the bar, other runners know you're single, and they can talk to you accordingly. So there's a lot of different types of clubs. There also are, Tony, clubs that are, you know, focused on maybe a certain type of affinity or background. We've got, you know, certainly BIPOC clubs, lots of them in New York City. There are clubs that are catering to, you know, Asian Americans, to Latinos. There are clubs that focus on women. There are clubs that focus on men. There are LGBTQ plus clubs. Like, there are all kinds of clubs that cater to different identities. There's a Jewish running club that's come up in the last year or two. So there's a lot of different types of clubs that, you know, really cater to a lot of different types of people. And the beauty is there's something for everybody out there, you know? So you no matter how seriously you want to take running, you can find a club, especially if you're in a place like New York.
Oh, buddy, I love it. It's and to be fair, I knew nothing of this. Obviously, I used to run. I don't anymore. You got me inspired. So I want you to continue to inspire me, and not just me and the audience. Give the audience reasons, especially people who aren't very active, who maybe was running years ago and I can't do that. Talk to them a little bit of the benefits of running and why, even though, and when you hear all these clubs, people are thinking they're marathons, right? They're running 30, 40 miles, when most likely it could be a running club where they're running a mile, all right, or 2 miles. So speak a little bit about that, the benefits, and how everyone can participate no matter what they are.
100%. Thank you for that question. And I meet people all the time that are like, oh, I'm not really a runner. Like, I just maybe could run a mile. I'm like, wait, you can run a mile? Guess what? You're a runner.
There's a club for you.
Yep. You are a runner. In fact, I was at the Olympics in Paris, as you mentioned, and Gabby Thomas, who won 3 gold medals at the Olympics. I've gotten to know Gabby a little bit. She's an amazing young lady. And she competes in the 200 meters and the 400 meters in the relay. And Gabby told me one day she has never run a mile. Like, she's never run a mile like without stopping. Like, that's like never gone that far without stopping.
She can run fast and short distances, but that's it.
Is Gabby Thomas a runner? Yeah, she's a runner, right?
Right.
She's a sprinter, but that's a runner, right? And so you don't have to run a marathon, a half marathon, even a 10K to be a runner. And there's so many different ways to get into it and to start. A lot of people, I say, you start maybe with a run walk, go out, find a track or just go around your block, run a quarter mile, then walk, then run again a quarter mile, then walk. And you'll start to feel the benefits really quickly. That's the reason is you go and you do that 2 or 3 times and you will feel different. You will see the difference. You may not notice a big difference in your body. You may not lose weight or whatever it is you want to do out of the gate, but you will feel it. And then you do it a few times and you'll start to want it. You'll start to want to go back to it. And the benefits get greater and greater the more that you give. You truly get what you give when it comes to running. And it's not always about the distance. A lot of it is about the frequency and the discipline that it creates. And I personally, and this is not for everyone, but I personally am a huge believer in running in the morning. That's how I start my day. I have a saying I use around town in New York. I say, win the morning, win the day, right? I tell my kids this all the time. You have a good morning, you get up, you get that run in or whatever your exercise might be. I've never once gotten up and run before 8 a.m. and then by noon been like, boy, I wish I hadn't gone for that run this morning. That was a mistake. That got my day off to a bad start. That has never once happened to me.
Right.
Whereas I have regretted staying in bed more than a few times, right? Why did I sleep in? I should have gotten out and done something.
Exactly.
So it's a way to kind of start your day. And what I think is so important about it is that it gives you a little mini sense of accomplishment just from starting your day. And if you talk to people who have been through periods of depression, a lot of what they're dealing with is a sense of futility and hopelessness. And, what's the point? Why get out of bed? Why even try? Like, it's just going to be another bad day. It's going to be another useless day. I'm not going to have a good day today, right? That act of getting up and doing it in the morning, doing that little run, whatever it might be, is a way to have accomplished something already out of the gate that gives you a little positive momentum in your day and a belief that something good is going to happen that day because you've already had a good thing happen that you created yourself. And that to me is the power of running, is just that momentum that it gives you that you can build on to do other good things in your life.
Buddy, that is awesome. And again, I think we have some stats here. Study shows, the CDC shows that adults can lower the risk of depression by 18 to 20% by starting an exercise program like running. It reduces stress, improves sleep, things you just talked about, boosts brain power, which also can contribute to improving your mental health. So a lot of benefits. The key is to get started, right? And more importantly, little baby steps, like in anything that when you're trying to create a habit, little baby steps and the consistency, and you will see the benefit. And again, this is where we get, I ran for 2 weeks. This is an old saying, it gets worse before it gets better. I ran for 2 weeks, and instead of being fat and out of shape, I'm sore, fat and out of shape. All right. So guess what? Just keep at it, keep focusing, but look at the benefits that you spoke about, which is great. How can, and again, you've been doing this for a while, you've seen the increase over the last 4 years. You guys have been sold out in a lot of things that you're doing. How can we make running more inclusive where we can get more people of color to run, right?
Yeah, so that's been a huge focus at New York Roadrunners now for a number of years. we really think a lot about this. We want to make the sport something that's welcoming to everyone. And, we have a lot of efforts underway to do that. A lot of it starts at a young age and getting kids moving and running. I have a big belief that I want us to do more on the track, actually, because I think a lot of kids that you start running on the track oftentimes, and then
Right.
you graduate to maybe running longer distances on the road. But even for adults, like, we need to show people, and we're doing more and more of this. I think Roadrunners has gotten really good at this as an organization, of telling stories of people who have all kinds of different backgrounds, and not presenting an image of the sport that is only for, a certain body type or a certain ethnic background or gender. And so we're doing a great job of that, I think, as time goes on, and letting people know that there is a place for you in the sport. And, I think a lot of that does come down to storytelling, but
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to other things like, we keep our finish lines open so late into our races. We basically say, if you're running a 16-minute mile or walking a 16-minute mile pace or better, we're going to keep the finish line open for you so that you'll get a time, you'll get a medal, you'll be recognized as a finisher. We make a huge deal at the marathon of our final finisher, the people who come in well past dark at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night on marathon day. Those people are celebrated in New York. And that is a signal to everybody that you don't have to be running, a sub 4 hour marathon to be welcomed here as part of this community. It doesn't matter how fast you are. It doesn't matter what your body type is. Like, there's something in it for you. And then, of course, we really want to partner with these clubs that are doing such a great job, Black Girls Run, or, Harlem, the running in Harlem, or, I mean, so many great clubs that are out there doing things. We talk to them a lot about making sure that we give them an opportunity to run our races and to be a part of our community. So it's multifaceted, what we need to do. I think so much of it does come down to storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it does come down to, like, the actual policies, like the things we do, like keeping that finish line open, which make people feel like they don't need to be real fast to run
Right.
our race.
Yeah, it's a mental thing, right? Because when you think of running, you think of slim, you think of I got to be in shape. Those are the pictures that you see in your head. Let me come with another picture, and I love to get your feedback. So obviously, our audience is obviously all different type of backgrounds and stuff that nature. However, there's a lot of people of color who are in corporate America and stuff of that nature, who are trying to climb that ladder or trying to be an entrepreneurial, build a business, whatever the case may be, right? And obviously, as they do that, as we spoke about earlier, you spoke about earlier, they're in rooms where they're the only one, okay? Especially as they get higher up the corporate ladder or even in their own business, right? What advice? You've been a person that's been successful in, yes, it's been in sports and stuff, but it's been at multiple organizations. Like you said earlier, you had the belief that, hey, if I worked hard, I could do this. I can pretty much show up and do anything. What advice would you give, also based on your own story? What advice would you give people of color, young executives, people that's inspired, not just to run, but also make a mark in business, whatever the case may be, when they're the only one or one or two, and they have to navigate as you did, which we didn't talk about as you did, navigate all the little nuances and tank traps and stuff along the way just to get to where they want to go. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, we all deal with it, minorities in these positions. We all would deal with it at some point in our careers. And I think the first thing I would say is, like, look for champions and mentors. Look for people who are going to have your back and who believe in you. And those people can be of any background. They can be Black, white, whatever the
Correct.
background is. I've had both. I've had Black and white mentors in my career, and a mentor is someone who actually really does care about you and wants to see you succeed. And I had some great ones in my career. I think of people like George Bodenheimer, who was the president of ESPN when I was there,
Yes.
or Mark Shapiro, who was a senior guy there, both white men, but also a guy like Reggie Williams, who was a Dartmouth graduate, played in the NFL, and then went on to become a big executive at Disney. Incredible mentor to me. So, and of course, my father, my original mentor. And so you need that to get through, because there's just so much you're not going to know, and you need someone to kind of show you the roadmap a little bit, show you the pitfalls and the traps and how to deal with them. But then you also need to listen.
Right.
You know, like you're having a mentor is not worth a lot if you don't actually listen to what they tell you.
Absolutely.
And that can be easier said than done, you know, but you do need to listen, including to the hard stuff. When someone tells you about your faults or about a mistake that you made or about the way you're kind of showing up in a room, like you need to listen to that to get better. And so that's key too. And then I think also like just giving yourself any advantage you can. And, you know, I talk about win the morning, win the day. Like if you're the one who shows up at the office at 8:15 when everybody else shows up at 9, right? And not only that, you already ran 3 miles and took a shower and now you're there, worked out, refreshed, feeling good. And you're way ahead of everybody else. It's like a race. Like you've lapped the field already and it's not even 9, right? That's going to show up. Like you do that over and over and over again. And those laps, so to speak, start to add up. Right. And you're giving yourself the advantage. So it's the old cliche, you got to be twice as good, work twice as hard, all that stuff. It's all true. But it's not just in your work. It's about the other stuff you do around that as well. That's what forms the person that you're going to get that opportunity or not get that opportunity at some point.
Awesome, my friend. Thanks for that. Final thoughts. What do you want to leave the outside of what you just got finished saying, which was great? Any other final thoughts that you want to leave the audience, my brother?
Well, that's great. I mean, one thing I will say is what's been great for me is at Roadrunners. I think what I love about it most, this job, is that it actually kind of combines a passion I have and the background I have with something I truly care about, making a difference. It's hard to find that. The nonprofit sector, this is the first time I've ever worked in the nonprofit sector, and it's amazing. I think what I'm happy about is that I took my 20-something years of experience in the law and the private sector and brought it to this nonprofit role with a lot of those skills intact. I think it's really important as you're coming through your career to get the training at a young age at places that are good for training. Like, you know, I practiced law at big law firms for 3 or 4 years, not because I thought I wanted to be a partner in a law firm. I was pretty sure I didn't, but it sharpened me.
Right.
It gave me an understanding of how things are. And then my years at ESPN, I was really inculcated in a culture there of success and of how you do it in the sports industry. You know, ESPN was like the IBM of sports.
Correct.
NBC Sports, you know, got to, you know, have a high level role and sat in a lot of rooms with some really top people. And so for me, the transition into a place like Roadrunners has been great because the background I got in those places has been amazing in a different kind of place like Roadrunners, a nonprofit. I think it's great if you have the opportunity in your career to get that experience in some of those tougher places, you know, whether it's at a law firm or maybe it's an investment bank or somewhere that's going to sharpen you, right, is great because it's going to make you better in anything you do down the road.
Buddy, I love that. I really appreciate it. I have a final question for you. How can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you, Rob?
Well, thank you. I think that, Tony, getting this word out there is great. I think getting the word out about the benefit of what we do and running in our organization. And I think inviting people to join us, especially if they're in New York, you know, if folks want to go to nyrr.org, New York Roadrunners, nyrr.org, check us out, check out our community. We'd love for you to become a member if you're out there listening, and we can help you find a running club or just come run with us. We got our own running classes and things like that. We would love to see more Black executives running in our races and showing up at our events and volunteering and being a part of what we do, because that's going to create more role models for these kids that we're trying to get running. So I think that would be the thing is join us, show up, and become part of the community.
Buddy, I love it. We're going to have your website and stuff up on our episode and on our website so people can go directly and register and check you out. There's a ton of information that you have on the website, running clubs, how to train, how to exercise, all that type stuff. So it's definitely something that you want to check out. And here's the other thing, real quickly. I saw a Facebook post, I think it was Facebook, where Rob Simmelkjaer was calling new members who had just joined and letting them know that they can run in the New York Marathon.
That was so much fun.
Am I right with that?
You are right. That was so much fun. We added a new way into the marathon this year. It was a second chance drawing for members of New York Roadrunners. And we let in a good number of runners that way. I think about 1,000 or so got in through that second chance drawing. And I said it would be really fun to call a few of them and tell them. And so, we put a camera in my office and I called a bunch of them, and it was so much fun to make those calls. We're doing that every year. Like, I'm going to set a whole day aside for that next year, because it's like the most fun thing that you can do is call people and tell them they got into the TCS New York City Marathon. It was awesome. It was really, really great. And by the way, Tony, one thing I should say before I go, I am going for my third ever marathon.
Wow.
On September 29th, I am running the BMW Berlin Marathon in Berlin, Germany. I'm running that because it's one of the 6 marathons that's part of the Abbott World Marathon Majors, as New York is. It's their 50th anniversary race. It's also very flat, which is part of why I'm running it. And so I'm going to go for it. It's my third ever marathon, and people can actually find me on Instagram. I'm posting about that as I get closer to it. And I'm running that marathon to benefit our Team for Kids charity program, which raises money for all those youth and community programs I told you about. So you can follow me on Instagram, RT Simmel, or check it out in a lot of different places and follow my road to Berlin and support our Team for Kids as well.
Buddy, send us that info, and then we'll put it up and we'll share it. And I'm going to follow you on Instagram too, just to see how well you do. And you got me inspired, buddy. So I'm going to be like you told everybody else. I'm not looking to run 26 miles. All right. I'm going to start off little by little, get back to where I used to run 3-4 miles every time, a couple of days a week. Get back to that. So I really appreciate you. And more importantly, Rob, thank you for coming on, bringing the energy, telling your story and educating everyone that's listening to this, how running can be very effective for them, change their life, but more importantly, be able to help diversify what they do, where they can now be able to do something they didn't think they could do. And that's one thing about running. So stay right there, my brother. We're going to have you join us for our call to action. So I think it's now time for what?
Tony's Tidbit.
All right. So the tidbit today is by Mina Samuels. And obviously our tidbit is always about what we talked about. So Mina says, our running shoes have magic in them. The power to transform a bad day into a good day, frustration into speed, self-doubt into confidence, and chocolate cake into muscles. And that was by Mina Samuels. And you heard Rob talk about this earlier. When you get up and own the morning, you own the day. So one of the things we want to remind you is don't forget to check out Need to Know every Thursday by Dr. Nasinga Burden. Dr. Burden dives into the timely and crucial topics that shape our community and world. You definitely want to tune in and gain some insight on the things that she's bringing to the forefront that you need to know. Don't forget to check her out every Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Transformative Power of Running with Rob Simmelkjaer. And now it's time for our call to action. Obviously, a Black Executive Perspective podcast. Our goal is to decrease all forms of racism, okay? Not just racism, discrimination. So our call to action is called LESS, L-E-S-S. Kick us off, Rob.
All right, the L is learn. Educate yourself on racial and cultural nuances. And I like this because there are so many nuances out there, and it's really easy to walk into it without knowing what you're saying, right? You can offend, you can get yourself into trouble in a lot of different ways and create a lot of needless stress and drama because you don't know the nuances. And so it's good to ask questions, to listen and try to learn and understand what other people hear when you may say a certain thing, or what other people see when you do a certain thing. So educate yourself, whether you're white or black, because you will be a better person in our culture and society and in our workplace if you learn what is up.
Absolutely. And then after you learn, E stands for empathy. Now you should be more empathetic to your friends, family, your colleagues, because you've learned more about them and you can understand, see their point of view and understand what they've gone through.
The S is for share, which is share your insights to enlighten others. And it's true, if you just keep what you know to yourself, you're not really helping anybody. So when you've learned something, share it. If somebody says something to you that maybe you know they shouldn't have said, like pull them aside in like a friendly, nice guy way and say like, hey, when you said that thing, it kind of sounded like this, and I know you didn't mean it like that, but, you probably want to reconsider how you phrase that in the future, because those little things are the moments that make us all better.
Absolutely. And then Rob spoke a little bit to the final S. The final S is stop. You want to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. So if Grandpa says something at the Thanksgiving table that's inappropriate, you say, Grandpa, we don't say that. We don't believe that. And you stop that, right? And if everyone can incorporate less, LESS, will make a more understanding world. And more importantly, we'll see the change that we want to see, because less will become more. So again, we appreciate you following a Black Executive Perspective podcast. You can listen to our next episode wherever you get your podcast. You can follow a Black Executive Perspective on all our socials, X, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at a Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, Rob Simmelkjaer, CEO of New York Roadrunners. Appreciate him being here. For my man behind the glass, Khalees, who makes all this happen, I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We love you. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.